Welcome back to Financial Therapy. It's not just about the money. I'm personal financial planner, columnist, and financial therapist Rick Kahler. Research tells us that 90% of all financial decisions are made emotionally, not logically. For nearly 4 decades, I've been helping people make better money decisions. So what makes my financial worldview different from most financial experts? I blend the nuts and bolts of financial advice with the emotions that drive making them. Good money decisions are not just about the money. So let's get started with today's episode. Welcome back for another edition. It's probably no surprise to all of you that I rather like Charles Dickens. I have especially A Christmas Carol. Loved that story ever since I was a kid, and shockingly was able to use that story to really provide a methodology for financial therapy. That's not something as an 8-year-old I ever imagined. Well, Dickens, of course, wrote a lot of very famous book, although pretty sure Christmas Carol is his most famous work. And if I remember right, I think the copies sold exceed that of the Bible, but I say that a little hesitancy because I'm not even believing that in this moment, but pretty sure I ran across some stats like that at one time. Nevertheless, his works are very popular. He has another popular novel that he wrote called A Tale of Two Cities. I am sure that you probably studied this somewhere in middle school or high school or maybe even college. And the takeaway from this particular novel, the super cliff notes of the cliff notes, is that he demonstrates in this story that appearances can be deceiving. While the two cities on the surface appear very similar, when you really dig into their underpinnings, they're very different. So this theme that Dickens brings out in this novel really extends far beyond the novel, and we can apply it to various aspects of life. And it may not shock you that I've applied it to financial therapy. And especially in this episode, I want to contrast the approaches to long-term care taken by two seemingly similar families. Both families share numerous similarities in the terms of race, in the terms of their political parties that they belong to, their religious beliefs, their sexual orientation, their family size, their age, their income, and their net worths are also equal. At first glance, I would assume that their approaches to many things, and many things financially, because obviously both families, both sets of parents were able to live on less than they spent. So their views about money were very similar. So you might assume that their approaches to long-term care would be similar. But on closer examination, there are significant differences, significant ways that they view life, independence. So I just wanted to dig into these differences a little bit. The parents of the first family, as I indicated, really value independence. They really believe in taking care of themselves, and it would be no surprise that they taught their kids to be independent. But they really strive to maintain their autonomy as they age, to the point that they rarely reveal medical emergencies to their children. They choose to handle these by themselves, and oftentimes it takes them weeks, months to inform anybody in the family of what's going on. They are pretty proactive and aware, I would say, of their aging or the aging process. And so they determine to sell their home and move into an independent living community. And of course, they don't let their kids know this until they're all settled in and everything has been dispersed or put in storage and is all handled. They continue to be aware of their declining health that naturally comes with age. And so they make the decision that it's time to transition to an assisted living unit. And the difference between independent living is there's no services provided outside of like a meal a day, maybe sometimes 2 meals a day. Everything is there in the unit that, exercise, facilities and entertainment facilities, and the just community involvement with the people that live there, who of course they knew many because it was in a town they lived in for a long time. But as they notice continual decline, like many independent living facilities across the nation, they have independent, they have assisted living where you get far more support, and then they have skilled nursing, which is skilled medical, round-the-clock medical services. All assisted living can have medical services. They're typically not as, intense. Like, for example, if you can't get into bed and need to be lifted in bed, there's some facilities that will say, well, if you need the assistance of one person, that qualifies for assisted living. But if you need 2 people to get you in and out of bed, that's skilled nursing. So just proactively a step up in services that are available. So they decided to move themselves into an assisted living complex to have more services. And of course, they inform the kids after the fact that they are now living in the same unit or same complex, just a different unit. Well, there was a child that did live in the same city. And as normally happens, it's pretty normal that several of the kids have moved away, and there's one kid that is closer by, or very close. So some of the care, the decision-making fell on the child that was closest, which is quite usual, especially medical. And despite having a full-time job, the child and their spouse found time to care for the parents, mostly because of the services that were available 24/7. The child was able to collaborate with the staff and the nurses and the doctors to ensure that the parents receive the medical care necessary. And so the child was able to kind of give the 30,000 foot view and coordinate, know what was going on with all the medical care, and really help them out. And if I remember right, that child did have the power of attorney, both financial and medical. So immediate concerns were resolved with the staff of the assisted living center able to call the child whenever there was something that needed immediate attention. And I think the point here is that child and his spouse were able to both have a life and be involved with the parents. In stark contrast, I know of another situation where the parents valued dependence and a lot of family inclusion, and relied heavily on their children for support in all aspects of life. So as they age, they actually had an expectation that their children would always be there for them. It was a family value to support one another. So they adamantly rejected the idea of moving to an independent living facility. They wanted to stay in their home. They wanted to die in their home. Now that's not unusual. In fact, I would almost say the majority of clients that I have absolutely want to stay in their home and die in their home. They don't want to go to any type of care facility, independent, assisted living, or skilled. And I think that's normal. I think that's reasonable. And fortunately, with where long-term care is today, a lot of in-home services are available. And there's quite a benefit to staying in your home as long as possible. And somewhere the services have to be provided. There's even long-term care policies that will provide financial support for in-home care services, and some that will actually provide for family members, pay family members to care for these, as I discussed last week. But this can be problematic if the parents have money scripts that they can't afford in-home services because they can be very expensive, several thousands of dollars a month, or they have money scripts that you don't pay kids for services, or they have scripts in general, what it means to live in an independent community or a care facility. So for whatever reason, they just adamantly reject the idea of moving even into an independent care facility. And it's quite a transition going from a home to basically an apartment. In our area, homes usually come with lawns or green space, usually require a lot of upkeep. But going into an apartment is not always desired. Now, I have a number of clients that, like the first family, are very proactive in moving into independent living long before they absolutely need to. So there's different values that are held. So in this case, the value is we want to stay in our home at all costs. So the kids gradually became more involved in their parents' daily lives. They would share responsibilities like transportation to the store, shopping, transportation to the medical appointments, which can become pretty ubiquitous as we age. I just think of the medical appointments I have to maintain, and I'm like, wow, what would happen if I was unable to really care for myself? It would be overwhelming for somebody. And as one of my friends said, and I believe I've said this before, when I was expressing how everybody needs, as they age, a medical advocate, and what happens to those that don't have family or can't afford to pay a medical advocate. And he is a CFP. He just looked at me and say, well, Rick, they die. Anyway, back to the story. The kids just help with everything, financial decisions and the medical appointments and the medical knowledge, etc. So as time went on, despite the children starting to realize the enormous amount of help they needed and suggesting to the parents that they could benefit from independent living, the parents met such suggestion, according to the kids, just with much resistance, were very stubborn, and insisted they could take care of themselves. And the one child once told me, she said, I told them that today they have choices, they have options about where they go. But if they wait until there's an emergency, those options kind of go out the window. Well, that is inevitably what happened. Their father suffered a stroke during the night one time. It went unnoticed until the following day, and it resulted in a delayed hospitalization and an extended stay in a rehab facility. And so the sad thing was, because nobody was there to notice, they apparently didn't have one of those help I've fallen and I can't get up devices, which would be an admission of their state, and there was no awareness, so I understand, of their state. So the care that might have saved him from the long-term effects of a stroke wasn't there. So the family was forced to quickly secure the first available independent facility for their mother, who really couldn't take care of the house, and live all by herself there. So fortunately, this unit was nearby, and they were able to get her moved in. It took several months of going through the house and sorting things out, having rummage sales, carting things off to the consignment shop where they could sell it, taking other stuff and donating it, and then preparing the house for sale, then selling it and taking care of all the financial detail with that. So as time went on, and I should say it was really fortunate that they were able to find a place close by, which is not always a given in an emergency. When you've got to find an independent living center, assisted living center, skilled nursing home, whatever it is. Well, now it's true in our area that you've got to get on a waiting list in almost every case. In the city where these parents were located, they were more easily able to find an independent living unit right where they would have wanted to be. So that part worked out pretty good in the crisis. So eventually the father partially recovered from the stroke, was able to move in with his wife in independent living, and they needed a lot of assistance, and they continued to reject any type of in-home help and really relied on their kids to continue to provide the level of service that they had become accustomed to. As time went on, all the kids had a job, and all the kids had their families and their lives. So the burden of taking care of the parents started to fall on the one child who was willing to sacrifice work hours, work less, was in a job where that was an option, was willing to sacrifice the time spent with the family and provide the parents with around 24 to 30 hours a week of care. So as this went on, that particular child started to become emotionally and financially overwhelmed from the extensive care that they were providing. And despite assisted living being the obvious solution, the parents continued to adamantly refuse that they were ready to move into that. And there were money scripts involved, I understand, around what they could afford and not afford, even though there's no question they could have afforded that. And their belief was that they could step up the care for themselves if the child needed to step back. And similar to what we discussed last week, there was no consideration in this family of paying the child for services. This was something that was expected. I mean, it just wasn't on the radar screen. And when it comes to in-home, at least in our area, in-home care runs $30 to $40 an hour by an unskilled care. And like a nurse runs $70 to $100 an hour. But there were, like I said, no consideration of reimbursing the child. Well, as you could expect, and tragically, the father suffered another stroke during the night, didn't receive the care, even though they're in independent living, didn't receive the care that he needed, until the child visited the next day and discovered him immobile. So ambulance was called, the father was admitted or taken to the emergency room, admitted to the hospital, and later moved to a skilled nursing facility. At the same time, the mother was just struggling to live alone with her husband gone. The family decided it would be best to secure the only available assisted living unit that there was. It was located in a different complex in that town, which was located about 10 miles from where all the kids lived. And I don't know, I'm in a small city, so 10 miles is less time consuming to get to than 10 miles in a large city, which could take hours to get to. So this required a lot of time and attention from the family to facilitate another move, to manage the father's ongoing medical needs. And sadly, after a couple of months, the dad passed away. So mom is now in a different care facility. There's no former friends there like there were in the first facility. And the distance really cuts down on the visits from the family. So this tale of two families illustrates the deceptive nature of appearance. Like I said previously, despite their similarities, their approaches to long-term care and their approaches to life, their approaches to how they valued independence or dependence, revealed stark differences. The first family's embrace of independence, coupled with professional support, ensured adequate care for parents without overwhelming the children. And you might think, well, you flip that around, right? Weren't they okay with dependence on help? Well, yeah, but in this case, their independence actually led to wanting to take care of things themselves and to not, quote, burden their kids. In contrast, the second parent's reliance, dependence, their value of dependence on their children, and resistance to alternative care options led to a series of crises and overwhelming responsibilities for one child. One might think, well, they valued dependence, they would be able to ask for help, but it was just the opposite. So ultimately, their failure, all their money scripts and the emotions involved, in IFS speak, the exiles that were triggered by the thought of moving into a care facility, really resulted in their needs not being met in a way that was sustainable. They missed opportunities to be proactive and had really suboptimal outcomes. So, the bottom line is that our money scripts, I mean, it's not a cute little a way to refer to beliefs around money. Our money scripts can, especially those narrow and rigid ones, can really be a life and death matter in the way that we approach money. And this particular story really serves as a reminder that things aren't always as they seem. And especially when it comes to long-term care options. It's really crucial that one explores all the money scripts that they hold around what it means to be cared for, what it means, the money scripts around financial resistance of getting the care needed, the money scripts around what it means to own a home. All of this needs to be given a lot of attention to. Take care, and I look forward to being with you next week. Thanks for joining me, Rick Kahler, for another episode of Financial Therapy. It's not just about the money. This is where I combine the nuts and bolts of financial advice with the emotions that drive making them. Remember, every financial behavior, whether it appears illogical to you or others, makes perfect sense when we understand the underlying beliefs, feelings, and thoughts. Sign up for my weekly blog at financialawakenings.com. I hope you'll join me again for our next episode.